So trompe-l'oeil is, it's French for deceive the eye or trick the eye. So it's to make things look realistic. And the concept goes back thousands of years. Originally, it was, what we would think of as simple perspective, but that was apparently pretty innovative in Pompeii in AD 770. But it really got to be a big thing in the Renaissance. And as you can see in 1506, this ceiling in Ferrara really looks like there's people and a fancy ceiling when it's just paint. And so that's kind of the concept of making things look like something else. The Renaissance really took it to high art and painting. The ceiling on the left is just paint. It's a flat ceiling. Really? It looks like it has tremendous depth. And it turns out that it's easier to paint a dome like that than it is actually to build one. Yeah, but it's an amazing deception. And the picture on the right, I mean, that kid looks like he's just jumping out at you. So it's, it's a very exciting technique. And it's been used in all kinds of things in modern times. So there's in London, there's it's actually a museum under reconstruction. So they put this on the outside, which is just, it's just a single canvas, but it looks like it's really covering the whole, the whole thing, and picture inside. And you could possibly see this Pepsi truck running around on and again, that's just paint on the outside. So it's quite interesting. Now this artist, John Pugh, I don't know if you can see his name there, if I'm covering it up with my controls, but my wife and I got interested in him. He's out in Nevada on the in the Lake Tahoe area near California. He's got many pieces in the Bay Area in California and in Nevada. We went and actually looked at, I don't know, a dozen or more of his pieces. They tend to be very large and they are amazing. I mean, this snake looks like it's just coming at you. So it's an exciting activity. But for woodworkers, it moves from paint, and the most obvious transition is to marquetry. Silas Kopf is just a fantastic marquetry furniture maker.
Yeah.
These cabinets, those doors are closed. They aren't open. That's just his use of wood veneers to paint picture in 3 dimensions, or in perspective to look like 3 dimensions. So there's no mouse in a drawer, and there's no cat reaching down, and the doors aren't open. But you've got to get really close to really grasp that. And I just find it breathtaking. And another guy, I bring up Ramon Valdez. He actually, I arranged him to do a presentation at my woodworking club. This is a piece that he did, which again is the same as there are no open doors there. And I really like the way he used the shadow on the door to make it look like it's really open. And he actually does online marquetry classes and sells marquetry kits that you can follow. So it's an interesting technique, but where I really get excited about it is when it's the 3 dimensions. And so Wendell Castle, who actually he passed away a year or 2 ago, but was an amazing woodworker, and he really brought this into woodworking. And I guess that was mostly in the late 60s and 70s. And the pieces are amazing. I mean, you just can't believe that these things isn't a leather jacket on a coat rack. If you ever get to Washington, D.C., the Renwick Gallery is a sensational museum, and it has probably the most famous of these trompe-l'oeil, pieces of his. And this is called the Ghost Clock. And that, of course, is not canvas. That's all wood that's been bleached. And the picture doesn't do it justice. If you you get up close, you just want to reach out and touch the canvas. It's absolutely remarkable how it is. So that's kind of seeing that was motivated to me. And when I saw a class on doing, you know, something minimal by comparison, but in that vogue, I was just really excited to do it. But before we move on to that, it's really, this notion has actually gotten onto street art. I don't know whether you'll be able to hear the sound. We had trouble with that before, but maybe you'll get a view of it with this guy doing his street art of a bear.
Wow.
Sure.
Cool. Say cheese.
Cheese. Oh, he's friendly. Buddy, it's not real cheese.
I don't know whether you could hear that or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quickly hear it? Okay, because we had trouble with the sound before, and I don't know what I did right this time, but whoops. Okay, so that's the introduction. So this was my attempt, was to, you know, to make a table where the top looked like a tablecloth, and it was begun at this class at Mark Adams. It was taught by Stephen Proctor, who actually worked with Wendell Castle. So he was actually working with Wendell Castle when he first started doing these trompe l'oeil pieces. And the top is mahogany that was carved and bleached and finished with lacquer. And the base is made of poplar, and it's turned in two pieces and painted. So to start something like this, you need a model that you can you can copy and be able to measure to get a sense. So we had a cloth this size, and then we built these stands. And the design of the stand, it's pretty simple, but the idea was you wanted to be able to stand it up, but you also wanted to be able to clamp it at different heights so that you could get access. And so this very simple model worked very well for doing that. By the way, if any questions along the way, just shout them out and ask. So the challenge you get to is, how do you map what you're looking at to what you're trying to, to the wood as you put it together, and how do you get that mapping? And so what we used was this compass style mapping, where we took the cloth of our model and we marked it out like a compass, northeast, southwest, and use that as a vehicle so that we would know what we were talking about. And here you see I've made a corresponding paper graph of it. And where I say layers, I'm going to laminate the top with 8/4 inch and 3/4 thick mahogany. So if you look at the layers, the first layer is 1 inch and 3/4, and then it goes up, to 3.5 and 5 1/4, and so on, as you stack wood that thick to get the depth. And that way, from this piece of paper, I can match, what the piece, how it moves. So he had this compass model. I added this notion of having this piece of wood that's like a ruler. I've marked it, and it's screwed at the very center of the model. So that way I can move it to any part of the model. I can tell how far out from the center the cloth goes by, I've got it indexed here on the ruler. So something that sticks out, I can take my metal ruler and go down 1 inch and 3/4, and now I know how much it protrudes at that point of the compass. And if it bends in, as cloth does, with a second ruler, I can get the direction out, and I can also get the direction in. So using that as a measuring technique to get, I'll call them outdents and indents as you go around, I can then go around the piece at each layer and map out how the piece moves. So the very first piece, you can actually, after you've done that and cut it out, and just doing this much here, that represents probably about a dozen measurements. So it takes a lot of measurements to actually be able to get a reasonable approximation of the curves. The first layer you can then bandsaw out, and you can put on top and see if you're close, and you can tweak it a little on the bandsaw, but you can't do that as you go down. So the lower layers, though, are hollow. So they're made in two pieces and glued with the grain. Whoops, glued, I'm going the wrong way. Glued with the grain so that you barely see that seam. And then they're always glued on to the layer that's just above. So here, for example, is layer 6. It's just the one I had the best picture of. You can see it's in two pieces. It's glued together, and then it's going to be added on to the prior 5 pieces and registered. It's hard to see on the picture, but you can see I've still maintained the north, east, west, south designation so that I can line it up pretty closely.
And you're measuring each layer as you go, Alan, right?
Each layer is getting, just that quadrant had about a dozen measurements.
Yeah.
So, so if you multiply that, that's maybe 48 measurements for each layer,
Right.
6 layers. So it's a pretty tedious thing to lay out. I think, people who are more artistic than I am might be able to do more of it by eye. But the thing is you do all that tedious measurement. I've been so careful. And then you stack this up, and I look at it and I say, I did all that work for this. It just, I just thought, oh my God. It didn't feel like it was close at all. So there's a lot of wood yet to remove. So I started with power tools, and he, was suggesting we use power tools. Not everyone used the exact same ones. Now this is an angle grinder, and this is a disc. I think it's called a galley. It's by a company called King Arthur. They have a variety of these things, and there's many of these discs that you can see from a variety of vendors. The thing I like about this one that's unique is it has these holes. I think they call it the Holy Galahad. And because of those holes, you can actually see through it while it's cutting. It's kind of like a stroboscope. And that gives you, for me at least, it helped me see what it was I was shaping. This is from the same company. It's called a Merlin. They have all this King Arthur terminology. And this is just smaller. It's not as powerful, but it's pretty powerful. And they offer all kinds of discs. They're quite expensive, but I just have, I think, this one. This will also take a Rolock sanding disc also, which is helpful. And then this is an air-powered die grinder that was very cheap at Harbor Freight. This is one of these burrs, and I had a couple of these small burrs. So now I don't have pictures of me actually, or videos of me actually working on this piece, but I kind of took a piece of wood. This happens to be maple, which is a lot harder than the mahogany. And I bandsawed it, so it's a little bit like the edge you saw on the pieces I had, just to give you a sense of how these things work. So here is the angle grinder, and watch to see what you can see through the holes. You can, I don't know if you can tell on your picture, but you see how you can see the wood right through where you're grinding. So you can make pencil marks in order to guide you. And it removes a lot of wood very quickly. So that's kind of the angle grinder. Now the Merlin is really an angle grinder. It's just smaller, and it lets you get into some more delicate pieces. So it's really pretty much the same kind of thing. It doesn't have the holes, but because it's smaller, you have better visibility. And you can see how it works. You can't press too hard, but it does remove a lot of wood, and you can get into places, and also where you you're getting closer and you don't want to remove too much, it's better than the big one. And then the die grinder was really good for narrower places that you had to, be able to get a quick line in. So So I found that really good for removing wood, but it was harder to get kind of a smooth surface. The other grinders could make it a little bit smoother and rounder, but you want to get into a narrow groove, then this works. So I used all of them to try to get through this process. So as you can see, as you hog away, you start getting towards a rougher shape. I tried using this Festool sander, but it was just too heavy to be of any use. It's really made for wood that's flat on the surface. But then, it starts little by little. It starts to get a little bit closer. And then when you start to get the, you start to get lots of effort and you start to get the shape better. Then what helps, whoops, I think I'm missing something because, well, maybe not. At this point, as you're closer but not too close, you now need to use hand tools and sanding tools, at least for me, because I found the grinders were just too gross to, so I won't try to demonstrate the chisels, but these are the ones that I mostly used. Lots of rasps of all kinds. This bottom one is called a riffler. It's an Italian thing. It's got a rough side and it has both concave and convex and a finer side. And it was very, very helpful on these different folds. This is a sander that's on the angle grinder. And it's much more powerful than the drill sanders that most of us use for power sanding. So I'll show you that just quickly. It really removed a lot of wood as well as smoothing out. So that was very helpful as well. And that's, I think, a 5-inch, pretty sure it's a 5-inch disc. And a company called Arbortech makes this thing called a mini sander, which also works on an angle grinder. And it's got this long stem and it's only about I think this is about 1.5 inches in diameter. And it's a little flexible so that you can get into lots of little spaces. And that works really quite well.
Oh,
Was there a question?
well, this is almost over.
What?
Okay,
Sure.
somebody needs to go on mute. So once you've got the shape, as you feel it's pretty close, at least I waited to try to do the shape of the, of the bottom of the drape, because I didn't want to damage that edge when I was hogging a lot of wood. So when I felt I was pretty close, and this I pretty much did by hand. There were some measurements, but trying to connect the dots and getting the shape of the bottom. And at that point, once I had this line, somebody had a reciprocating saw, so cut lots of slots close to the line. And then with a chisel and also that die grinder, was able to work the bottom edge. And of course, lots of hand rasping and hand sanding through that process. I can get my mouse to get over here. And then this is all conglomeration of sanding tools and sanding discs on the end of a stick to get into places that are hard to get to. And it took quite a bit of sanding. And then, after a while, it gets to a shape, and then it's ready to start on the base. So any questions on the carving before I go on?
How long did that take you to get to that point, Alan, roughly?
Well, the class I went to was a week-long class. So I guess it was maybe it was 5 days, I think. Now, of course, there was lots of timeouts for instruction, but there also were long days. And when I got home, it was not, a lot of it was done at home, and I probably spent a good 3 or 4 full days working at it at home in order to get it. So there was a lot of time in here. But I don't have an hour estimate, and it happened over a fairly long span of time. So it would go quicker on another one because you learn things like just like anything else. But it was a lot of work.
And did you do it mostly outside, given the amount of dust that you were generating with those grinders?
Yeah, the work at the school was almost all done outside. Only handwork was pretty much done inside, and it was in the summer. And actually, one of the reasons, and this was a lucky part, because we were outside, it was pretty windy. And because it was pretty windy, the model tablecloth was moving around quite a bit. And that worked out well because it gave me much more interesting shapes. Because if it was just indoors with no wind, it probably would have fallen in a much less interesting way. So that part was good. The bad part about it was it meant that things would change, and you thought you were there, and then it moved around, and you say, well, did it look like that, 5 minutes ago? But I still think that was lucky for me that it happened. But yeah, it was a lot of dust. So if I were to do it again, I would do it in warmer weather outside. Okay, so the base is pretty simple turning. I bandsawed a base platter. I put it on a screw chuck. I mounted and trued it up on the lathe. I then use this as this part as the bottom. So where I had the screw chuck was going to be the top of it. I inset the bottom so that it would be stable. And then I drilled a recess in order to have a way to mount it when I would turn it around. And if I recall right, I used a Foster bit to make a hole, and then I think I dovetailed a little bit with a skew chisel. So now I have it mounted on a chuck. I built up the base thickness with another piece of wood that I was able to use a tailstock to center, and added a little clamping. And then I could start to shape that for the base shape. And of course, at this point, what I'm showing you here is a copy of the original, because I hadn't had any photos when I made the original bottom. So, and I decided to make another one with a real cloth top. So I have one that's my carving and one that is cloth. Try to see if I can trick people when they come into the house. And so I was copying the design I had done earlier. And then I used a post. I turned it around. And one of the tricks that I learned actually was from one of the turners I follow on Instagram, one of the British pro turners who uses a storyboard for all these things. And he said, don't just make the storyboard, but put a indentation with a saw where all your lines are. And that way you have an indentation. So when you put it up to mark your board, your pencil doesn't move or drift when the thing is turning, because your pencil is sitting in that little cut.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that to transfer all of my marks. And then I used a parting tool to go to all of my marked depths. And then the rest was, I don't have pictures of it, but it was pretty straightforward spindle turning. I'm not much of a spindle turner, but it was, fairly straightforward shape, just trying to keep the same dimensions as the original. And then the indexing on my lathe, it sucks. So I use one of these aftermarket things to do the indexing. And I use this jig that is at center line in order to make pencil marks where I wanted to have all the flutes. So you can see them. And this is a tool that I have that holds a little router for making my flutes. I did a presentation on this for the club once before, but some of you may not have seen it. This is a platform that I clamped to the lathe bed, and it's got a T-track in the middle, and I can set the start and stop places. So it can show me, I can make sure I start at the same place and stop for each flute. This is an overhead view, just you can see the tip of the router bit, and this blue collar controls the depth. And generally, I will make 2 passes so that the final cut isn't that heavy. And so I'll just do this a little bit. So you can see how these stops, keep it at the same point. And I think this was probably a first pass, because the second pass, we're only cutting a little bit of wood, can be a lot smoother. And so when you've done that, now, I've gone all around and I've got all of the flutes in place. And then I did the same thing here on the upper part. And then I can rotate it using that yellow thing to move it. Here I'm doing a second pass. And then I rotate it, lock it in place, and do the next. And again, you get the various flutes all around. So as you can see them, I'll rotate it around. So that's the fluting process. And then after that, I had a hole there. I had made a post to fit, used the lathe to glue it together. And then to make a good transition, I then did this in, because I found it difficult to glue them together and get them to match really well. So after I glued it together, just this little part of it, I did the final shaping. And you can see my Ellsworth grind and doing my shear scraping. So it went from then at that point, I've got the base, it's unfinished. I had a friend who knows how to do Photoshop, and I asked her to mock it up so it looked like a gold bottom and a white top. But when the top was bleached, it didn't get really white, but I kind of liked the pinkish. You saw the wood is pretty dark. It might have been repeated bleachings could have got it really white, but I was pretty happy with this color. And I was much happier with this gold than the picture. And that's the story. So this is the original. This is the original model that I was using. And then this is the copy with a different piece of cloth and a remade base. so that I have an alternative. And I still need to get around to painting the base, but that's the story, and I'm sticking with it. So,
Well, Alan, oh, go ahead.
any questions I can answer for anybody about it?
Alan, I'm wondering, is there a reason why you chose mahogany?
Yes, mahogany is a really great wood for carving. On the one hand, it's hard enough to last long. It's hard enough to hold hard edges, but it's much more carvable and softer than some of the other woods. This would have been really, the piece I was demonstrating the grinders on and the sanders on was a piece of maple, because that's what I had lying around. And that's much harder. It would have been much harder to do this in something like maple. Walnut might have worked okay, though, the same thing in walnut would have cost a lot more. But mahogany is what the teacher recommended, and I think it's a really good choice for something like this. I think, for carving, from what I've seen from the 2 carving classes that I've taken, start with basswood and then move to mahogany, and save the really denser woods for when you are really an expert at it. And the mahogany is quite a bit hard, more difficult than basswood, but it's I think a very good choice.
I'm curious about the bleaching. I'm amazed that you can get mahogany as light as you did.
I think actually it could probably have gotten even lighter, but I didn't. I got happy with what it was, and liked the way it looked, and so I didn't want to try to keep doing it. But yeah, the bleach is pretty powerful.
Can you talk about what bleach you used and how you applied it and any technique about that?
Well, I had the True Confessions. I had bought bleach and read up about it, and I found myself, I'm very sensitive to chemicals. And so finally I decided to bring it to somebody to bleach it for me. So I don't know what he used, but I had some 2-part liquid bleach. I don't remember the name of it. I could look it up and let you know. And I loaned some of it to a friend of mine who used it quite successfully. But it was winter when I wanted to do this. I didn't want those smells in the house. So I let I had this other guy bleach it for me.
So you're not talking about household bleach. You're talking about
Oh,
some.
no, these are, no, household bleach would might be okay to, like Lysol or something to prevent mold from growing, but it's not going to give you this radical change of color. These are bleaches that are made for bleaching wood. Like I said, I don't remember the name, but I have them. They're 2-part bleaches. You have to be very careful. You need ventilation. You need the right kind of gloves, eye protection, all of that. And I think you put it on and you let it, you have to let it be on for a while, and then you have to get it off, and you have to dispose of the rags you got it off with. It's just, so this was something I was happy to have somebody else do for me.
And they did a nice job then too, because I think it turned out really beautiful with that color.
Yeah. I was very happy with it. I have to say that this was a, professional refinisher. And I had to talk him into doing the job. He didn't know how to price it. It was, wasn't like a typical thing for him. But he, once he said yes, and he did the best that he could with it.
And I would assume the bleach would raise the grains, so you'd have to sand afterwards.
Actually, he did have to sand lightly, but only after the first bleaching, because the bleach does not penetrate very deeply. So you can't do much sanding without sanding through. Now, I delivered it to him sanded to 600 grit pretty thoroughly, all over, most of which was by hand. And so it didn't, the grain, and I had also raised the grain myself with water during a couple of times during my sanding process. So there wasn't much grain raising, and I think he used very soft steel wool slightly after the first bleaching, and then the second bleaching I don't think he touched at all. But to touch, it's very smooth, so you don't feel any raised grain. And actually, for anything that's going to get a finish that might raise the grain, I always suggest to people that you wet it down along the way and raise the grain. Each time you wet it and sand it back, there's that much less in the cells that are likely to come out at the surface.
Also, looking at the technique, it looks like the fabric top has a fair amount of depth to it. You just angled back the edges very far so you don't see it.
That's right. You have to remember that this is, as it goes down, it's cross grain. The grain is running horizontally. So I didn't want to make those tips too thin. And I also found that let me see if I go back, when you look at the cloth ones, because of the way the fold is, you see a lot of thickness. So you kind of lose a sense of the fact that it's only thin. So I felt that, if you look at where my cursor is here, and you look at where my cursor is there, I thought that looked pretty similar. And so I wasn't motivated to make it too thin there.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly at the tips, I was afraid that it would break. So my wife is paranoid that someone will knock it over and break it. Matter of fact, I had it sitting between two swivel chairs, and she made me move it because she was afraid somebody would sit down and swing into it and knock it over. So I don't think it's that delicate, but I'm sure because this is cross grain, a good smack could probably cause a problem. But anyway, that was part of the motivation. And also it just seemed to turn this thing upside down and carve a huge amount out of it. I didn't see the point in it other than to reduce weight. And I wasn't motivated to do that. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your attention.
Now,
Thank you.
it was so much work. Would you do it again?
I don't know. I've thought about other pieces. What keeps happening is there's other things that I haven't tried that I then want to go do. It's one of the privileges of just being retired and doing this stuff for fun and not having any reason to keep doing a series of things because I'm never going to sell them. So, in theory, I think, well, I learned this and I could do something like this again, whether I will or not. I don't know. I've got this pile of unfinished other things to do, which probably lasts longer than the years I've got to do them. So I don't know.
And selling stuff like that, how could you possibly charge enough to be worth doing it again?
Yeah, I couldn't. I probably. I mean, look, that's it seems to me to make things and sell them, you have to have gotten down to doing them quickly, and I'm not at that point. Even for things like bowls. There's an article in the recent AAW magazine by Dale Larson. And going through his process of preparing wood, and he talks about how he cuts a big burl and then makes it into blanks that he's going to store, and then eventually he rough shapes them. And he talks about rough shaping. I think he said about 60 to 80 a day. Now, you know, I think that's what you're competing with, you know, and
Right.
there's a top talent. That's what you're competing with, you
Mhm.
know. And so if you make 1 in 2 days and you're competing, you know, I mean, it takes me half a day to rough turn something like that. And I
And
rarely
besides,
have
by then
energy
you're-
to do 2 in a day. So, you know,
And besides, you're effectively a factory worker at that point. Is that what you wanted to do in your retirement?
not me, you know, but, you know, I think, you know, if you're trying to make money at it, then I think that's, you know, you have to develop those, you know, those processes and knock those things out. And, you know, for some people, they enjoy that and get great joy out of being able to sell stuff, and, you know, and that's great. Other people, you know, like a John Jordan, he only makes, he used to make, in his heyday, he'd make about 50 pieces a year. Now he makes 25 or 30 pieces a year, but he's making true pieces of art that he can, you know, he can command a good price for. You know, David Ellsworth is like that as well. But, you know, most wood turners can't demand those kinds of prices for their efforts. So they're
Well,
more-
Alan, in the meantime, you've made a family heirloom, you know, one of a kind, and it's a piece of art. It really is.